Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I just did a TikTok recently about why it's so hard to be in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant and how they really show up well in the beginning. And one of the things I want to clarify is that there's a big difference between a dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant who leans avoidant. And a lot of times I have clients that will come and really think they're in a relationship with a DA when in fact they're in a relationship with an FA. And I see a lot of coaches out there that just sort of categorize all avoidants as the same, and they're actually like really different. I do have a background in this. I actually did go to school and graduate school for this and spent years counseling. I just happened to find that relationships were my niche. I dealt with victims and perpetrators of DV. I dealt with SA people that I counseled. I dealt with relationships, a lot of relationship stuff, trauma, anxiety. So I actually do have a background in this. And so I want to make sure that you really understand the difference between the two. So a lot of times you will have an anxious partner in a relationship that is activating the avoidant side of a fearful avoidant. And so a lot of times clients will come to me and be like, I'm in a relationship with a DA. This person shuts down, they withdraw, they won't deal with conflict, they won't get close to me. And really it is because of the relationship dynamics and because the anxious partner is causing that person to lean on their avoidant side, but they're not truly a dismissive avoidant. So a lot of this goes back to their childhood and their relationship with their caregivers. And so the dismissive avoidant had no emotional attunement as a child. There was no love, no nurturing, no affection. The day-to-day stuff was met. Maybe their lunch boxes were packed. Maybe they ran around to all of their soccer or football games. The parents showed up physically, but they did not really have any attunement or acknowledgement with the child's emotions and help them to process those and experience those and care for those. Whereas the fearful avoidant grew up differently. The fearful avoidant grew up learning that their caregivers could not be trusted. They carry a trust wound, a betrayal wound. They do not believe that people will be able to show up well for them and be able to meet their needs. And so they're always sort of looking for the other shoe to drop or waiting for the person that cares about them to let them down, betray their trust in some sort of way. So the dismissive avoidant does not like conflict, closeness, commitment, intimacy, expectations. They value their autonomy and independence. They want to spend a lot of time alone. They really are always deactivating and pulling away. Whenever they're triggered, they go into a trauma response of either flee or freeze, and they just withdraw and want to be alone. And so they're pulling back and deactivating within the relationship. Whereas the fearful avoidant does want to be close to their partner. So the DA feels defective internally because of their emotions that they experience, that they were taught are bad, shameful, to be suppressed. So they don't want you to see them at a deep level. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to be transparent. They don't want to be seen. The fearful avoidant very much wants to be seen, heard, understood, but they're also terrified. So your fearful avoidant who leans avoidant is someone who has that trust wound, is always waiting for someone to break their trust and expecting their partner to let them down, but they really desire closeness, commitment, and an intimate relationship. They really, truly want that, where a DA does not. A DA is afraid of that. But they're afraid of it because they're afraid once they have it and it feels good, that it's something bad's going to happen, their trust is going to be betrayed, and they're going to be hurt. And so they want it, but they're afraid of it. So there's this constant push-pull. And a fearful avoidant who leans avoidant will typically, when they're triggered, will typically use a deactivating or avoidant tactic to deal or cope as a coping mechanism. So there's also a fearful avoidant who leans anxious, and they're leaning in more. And a lot of times the person that's leaning in more in a fearful avoidant dynamic. So if you have two FAs, one who leans avoidant, one who leans anxious, when the anxious is leaning in, the avoidant's going to lean out. They are opposite of one another. And so the dismissive avoidant sort of always goes that way, but the fearful avoidant can change depending on the relationship dynamic. When a fearful avoidant feels safe, they do have the capacity to hold somebody else's feelings, to work through conflict, to do a lot of the things that the DA is just not good at and doesn't have the capacity to deal with. The FA is very in tune with their feelings. In fact, a lot of times they come out really big and they'll express them in really big ways. A lot of times when they do go into their avoidant, it's because they've expressed themselves in a really big way and they feel like they have not been heard or they've been betrayed. Those are typically the times when they will really shut down and go into that avoidant side. But they don't live in that avoidant side like the dismissive avoidant does. So hopefully that clarifies the difference. If someone just makes a comment about avoidance, just know that there's two different types and they are not the same. And if you've ever been in a relationship with either one of them, you definitely will know that they are not the same. A dismissive avoidant is difficult in their own ways with their lack of capacity, and the fearful avoidant is difficult in their own ways because they're so complex and they sort of swing on a pendulum between anxious and avoidant depending on what's going on with them, and they have that push-pull dynamic. So anyway, if you have any questions about that, put them in the comments.